Most people think discipline is a prison, a life of sacrifice, restriction, routine, saying no, waking up early, doing difficult things over and over again. And because of that belief, they spend their lives running away from discipline. They chase comfort instead. Convenience, instant gratification. The easiest path, the quickest reward. They believe freedom means doing whatever they feel like doing, whenever they feel like doing it. But look carefully. How many people living that way actually feel free? How many are free from debt, free from anxiety, free from regret, free from unhealthy habits, free from distraction, free from mediocrity? Very few. Because comfort promises freedom, but often delivers dependency. The freedom to avoid effort slowly becomes the inability to control yourself, and there is no greater prison than a life controlled by impulses. That is why Bob Proctor often emphasized that our lives are governed by paradigms, deep mental conditioning that silently controls our actions. Most people don't choose comfort consciously. They've been programmed to seek it, programmed to avoid discomfort, programmed to believe that discipline is painful, that sacrifice is unfair, that consistency is exhausting. But those beliefs create invisible chains. Because every time comfort wins over purpose, your future becomes smaller. Every time you choose temporary pleasure over long-term vision, you reinforce a pattern, and patterns become identity. Identity becomes destiny. That is why discipline is not punishment. It is liberation, because discipline gives you something comfort never can. Control. Control over your emotions, control over your habits, control over your attention, control over your future. Without discipline, life begins making decisions for you. Your emotions decide, your fears decide, your cravings decide, your distractions decide, and eventually, your circumstances decide. That is not freedom. That is unconscious living. Real freedom begins the moment you become capable of directing yourself regardless of how you feel. Because feelings change, purpose doesn't. Emotion fluctuates, vision remains, motivation disappears, standards endure. That is why successful people are not necessarily more motivated. They are more disciplined. They learn to act when motivation disappeared. They learn to move when fear appeared. They learn to continue when results were invisible. That is what separates dreamers from builders. Napoleon Hill spent years studying some of the greatest achievers in history. Again and again, he found one common characteristic: persistence, not talent, not luck. Persistence, because persistence is discipline expressed through action. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while reminding himself daily that he must govern his own mind before trying to govern anything else. Jim Rohn often said that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Bob Proctor taught that changing your paradigm requires repetition, and repetition requires discipline, because no paradigm changes overnight. No identity transforms instantly. Every extraordinary life is built one repeated decision at a time. One disciplined morning, one disciplined conversation, one disciplined habit, one disciplined thought. Until eventually, those small decisions become a new identity, and identity changes everything. Because once discipline becomes who you are, you stop depending on willpower. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing the work. You simply do it, not because it became easier, because it became natural. That is the hidden gift of discipline. At first, it feels difficult. Then, it becomes automatic. And finally, it becomes freedom, because the disciplined person no longer fights themselves every day. Their habits serve them, their mind supports them, their actions align with their future. While everyone else is constantly negotiating with comfort, the disciplined person is quietly building a life. People often say, "I don't want to live such a restricted life." But discipline doesn't restrict your future, it protects it. Every workout protects your health. Every book protects your mind. Every hour of focused work protects your dreams. Every difficult decision protects the person you are becoming. Discipline is simply choosing your future over your impulses. And that choice, repeated daily, transforms everything, because life always rewards consistency, not intensity. Anyone can work hard for one day. Anyone can feel inspired for one weekend. Very few people remain committed when no one is watching, when progress feels invisible, when results seem delayed. But those are the moments that matter most, because invisible victories create visible success. That is where character is built. Not in applause, not in recognition, but in solitude, in silence. When nobody knows you kept your promise to yourself, when nobody sees you choosing growth instead of comfort. Those moments change who you become, and who you become determines everything you achieve. Most people believe freedom comes after success. The opposite is true. Freedom comes after self-mastery, because once you master yourself, no external circumstance has the power to dominate your life. You become calm during uncertainty, focused during chaos, committed during difficulty. That is real freedom, not the freedom to escape effort, the freedom to remain powerful regardless of effort. That is why discipline has never been suffering. It has always been disguised freedom, because every disciplined decision removes another chain, another excuse, another limitation, another fear. Until one day, you wake up living a life that once seemed impossible. Not because you were lucky, not because life became easier, but because you became stronger, because you became someone capable of creating that life. And that is where everything begins, because strength is never something you suddenly discover. It is something you repeatedly build. Every difficult choice becomes another brick. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes another layer of confidence. Every moment you refuse to surrender becomes another piece of your character. That is why discipline is one of the greatest forms of self-respect. It is telling yourself every single day, my future matters more than my temporary feelings, and that simple decision separates extraordinary people from ordinary ones. Not because extraordinary people never feel tired, they do. Not because they never feel fear, they do. Not because they never doubt themselves, they do. The difference is, they refuse to allow temporary emotions to make permanent decisions. Most people allow emotion to become their leader. If they feel motivated, they work. If they feel discouraged, they stop. If they feel inspired, they dream. If they feel uncomfortable, they retreat. Their entire life becomes controlled by emotional weather, and emotional weather changes every day. That is why their results change every day too. One week they are excited, the next week they quit. 1 month they are committed, the next month they disappear. Not because their goals changed, because their emotions changed, but discipline creates emotional independence. It teaches you to continue moving even when your feelings disagree. That is true power, because emotions make wonderful servants, but terrible leaders. When emotions lead your life, consistency disappears. But when purpose leads your life, discipline becomes natural. Think about a pilot flying through a violent storm. The pilot doesn't abandon the controls because visibility disappears. He trusts the instruments. Likewise, your vision must become your instrument, not your emotions. Because there will be days when you cannot clearly see progress. Days when doubt whispers louder than confidence. Days when the work feels invisible. Days when you wonder if anything is changing at all. Those are the days that define your future, because anyone can continue when success is obvious. Very few continue when success is still invisible. That is why delayed gratification is one of the rarest skills in modern society. Everything today encourages immediate pleasure, instant entertainment, instant validation, instant comfort, instant results. But greatness has never been instant. The oak tree does not apologize for growing slowly. The mountain does not rush its formation. The diamond is not created without pressure. Nature itself teaches patience. Yet human beings constantly demand immediate rewards, and when they don't receive them, they abandon the process, not realizing that success was quietly forming beneath the surface. Bob Proctor often reminded people that the subconscious mind is programmed through repetition, not intensity. You cannot attend one seminar and expect your paradigm to transform. You cannot read one book and expect decades of conditioning to disappear. The old pattern must be replaced, again and again and again, until the new pattern becomes stronger than the old one. That is where discipline becomes your greatest ally, because discipline allows repetition. Repetition creates conditioning. Conditioning creates identity. Identity creates destiny. This is why discipline is far more than a productivity tool. It is a transformational force. It slowly replaces who you were with who you are capable of becoming. Every disciplined morning says, "I am someone who keeps my commitments." Every disciplined workout says, "I am someone who values strength over comfort." Every disciplined hour of study says, "I invest in my future." Every disciplined decision quietly rewrites your identity. Most people think identity changes after success. It doesn't. Success appears after identity changes. That is why someone can suddenly become wealthy, yet quickly lose everything. Their external life changed, their internal identity didn't. Eventually, reality returned to match their self-image. Your self-image is always pulling your life toward what it believes is normal. Raise your self-image, and your standards rise. Raise your standards, and your behavior improves. Improve your behavior, and your results inevitably follow. Everything begins inside, always. That is why discipline is an internal practice long before it becomes an external one. You first discipline your thinking, then your attention, then your emotions, then your actions, and finally, your entire life begins operating from a higher standard. That standard becomes visible in every area: the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you respond to criticism, the way you handle setbacks, the way you spend your time, the way you protect your peace, because discipline is contagious. Once it becomes part of your identity, it spreads into everything else, and the opposite is also true. Undisciplined thinking eventually creates undisciplined finances, undisciplined health, undisciplined relationships, undisciplined goals, because chaos inside eventually becomes chaos outside. Order inside eventually becomes order outside. That is why self-mastery has always been the foundation of every meaningful achievement. The world celebrates external victories, but every external victory was first an internal one. Someone resisted quitting, someone resisted distraction, someone resisted fear, someone chose consistency over convenience, again and again and again, until one day the world called it overnight success. But there are no overnight successes, only years of invisible discipline finally becoming visible, and perhaps that is the greatest misunderstanding of all. People admire the outcome, but they rarely admire the process that created it. They want freedom without discipline, confidence without repetition, success without sacrifice, peace without self-control. But life doesn't work that way. Everything valuable carries a price. The beautiful truth is, the price is always paid first, and the reward comes later. That is why discipline is not suffering. Discipline is an investment, one that pays dividends for the rest of your life. The question is never whether discipline is difficult. The question is, what is the cost of avoiding it? Because avoiding discipline also has a price, a far greater one. Years of regret, dreams postponed, potential wasted, a life that never fully becomes what it could have been. And that is a price too high to pay. Because the greatest reward of discipline is not the success everyone sees. It is the person you become while pursuing it. Money can be lost, recognition can disappear, titles can change, circumstances can shift overnight. But the character built through discipline, no one can take that away. That is why disciplined people carry a quiet confidence, not arrogance, not ego. Certainty, because they have proven something to themselves that no one else can validate. They know they can trust themselves, and self-trust is one of the rarest forms of wealth. Think about it. How many promises have people made to themselves, only to break them days later? I'll start Monday. This is the last time. Tomorrow will be different. Those promises slowly lose their power, not because the goals are impossible, but because every broken promise weakens self-belief. Every time you abandon yourself, your subconscious remembers. It begins whispering, "You never finish. You always quit. You can't trust yourself." Those whispers become identity, and identity quietly shapes every future decision. But discipline reverses that process. Every promise you keep, even a small one, sends a completely different message to your subconscious. I keep my word. I finish what I start. I can depend on myself. Those messages may seem insignificant, but repeated consistently, they transform self-image. And once self-image changes, everything changes. Because confidence is not built by positive thinking alone. Confidence is built by evidence. Evidence created through disciplined action. Every completed task, every early morning, every difficult conversation, every moment you chose growth over comfort. Those moments become undeniable proof. Proof that you are becoming stronger. Proof that you are becoming someone capable. Proof that you are no longer controlled by impulse. And when your subconscious accepts that new identity, your entire reality begins to shift. You stop looking for shortcuts, because you understand there are none. You stop comparing your timeline to someone else's, because you understand that growth is personal. You stop chasing motivation, because discipline has become your foundation. That is freedom. The freedom to wake up with purpose instead of confusion. The freedom to make decisions based on vision instead of emotion. The freedom to stay calm when life becomes uncertain. The freedom to build a future instead of reacting to the present. And perhaps that is why so few people ever experience true freedom. Because they misunderstand its price. They think freedom means having no responsibilities, no routines, no commitments. But the opposite is true. The people with the greatest freedom are often the people with the greatest discipline. They manage their money. So money doesn't manage them. They manage their time. So distraction doesn't steal it. They manage their emotions. So fear doesn't control them. They manage their attention. So the world cannot constantly pull them away from their purpose. Every act of discipline removes another chain. Every act of self-control creates another level of independence. Eventually, discipline no longer feels like sacrifice. It feels like peace, because there is something incredibly peaceful about knowing you are becoming the person you promised yourself you would become. No more internal conflict, no more endless negotiations with comfort, no more living according to temporary moods, just clarity, direction, consistency, and momentum. That momentum compounds, just like interest compounds in an investment account. Every disciplined decision builds upon the last one. Every good habit strengthens the next habit. Every victory over yourself makes the next victory slightly easier, until one day you realize something extraordinary. The life that once required enormous effort has become your normal. You no longer force yourself to think positively. You naturally think with purpose. You no longer force yourself to stay focused. Focus has become your default. You no longer fight to remain disciplined. Discipline has become your identity, and that is where true transformation lives. Not in achieving one goal, but in becoming the kind of person who can achieve any goal. Because goals come and go, identity remains. That is why your greatest investment has never been in your career, or your business, or your finances. It has always been in yourself. In strengthening your mind, in refining your character, in building the habits that shape your destiny. Because once you possess those qualities, you can lose everything and build it again. That is real wealth. That is real security. That is real freedom. So stop seeing discipline as punishment. Stop believing it steals your happiness. Stop confusing comfort with fulfillment. Because comfort gives temporary relief. Discipline gives lasting transformation. Comfort keeps you where you are. Discipline takes you where you were created to go. Every meaningful life has been built on thousands of ordinary decisions made with extraordinary consistency. No audience, no applause, no shortcuts, just one decision after another, one promise kept after another, one step forward after another. That is how great lives are built. Quietly, patiently, intentionally. So the next time your mind tells you discipline is too difficult, ask yourself a different question. What kind of life becomes possible if I master myself? Because the moment you master yourself, very little in this world can master you. And that is the hidden truth. Discipline was never your enemy. It was always your greatest ally. It was never suffering. It was freedom, disguised as effort. If this message challenged the way you think, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And right now, another video is appearing on your screen. Watch it, because your next breakthrough won't come from wishing for a different life. It will come from becoming a different person.